John 15:16 has some really interesting things. It's going to take a bit to do this verse. Certainly for you Calvinist Arminian types, you're going to want to discuss this. But there's also some strange morphology and some me verbs in here. So this might be a bit of a challenge. So take your time. You can do this. Uk humes me exalexaste, al ego exalexamen humas, kai etheka humas, hina humes hupagite, kai karpon ferite, kai hakarpas humon mene, hina hate an etesisthe ton patera into anamatimu do humin. First of all, notice the emphatic placement of the negation uk, not you, me, and then what on earth is this? Well, this may be more than you want to know, but in case, what you've got is a preposition that is technically X with a C, not a kappa. And then you add your verbal part to it. And what you have here, if I can transliterate, you have an EKSL. And this sigma is called an interconsonantal sigma. So in other words, it's a sigma between two consonants, there and there. Greek doesn't like interconsonantal sigmas, so it drops out. And that's why when you're unaugmented, you have ek legomai. Okay, middle deponent. But when you put your augment in there, so that's the augment right there, you don't have an interconsonantal sigma, and so the C comes back. Now, that may be more than you want to know. But just remember that ek goes to X when there is an augment. How's that? So not you, me, chose. You feel the emphasis. You did not choose me, but I. So you have this really nice contrast in the pronouns and in the word order. But I chose you, and now what's this? Etheka. Well, again, if you remember your roots, theta epsilon is the root of the verb that we memorized as tithemi, right? And then what happens, you have reduplication, then you have a deaspiration, so forth and so on. Well, none of that is there. That's only in the present, I should say. So you don't have that. So you just have the theta eta, which is the root. See why it's so important to know your roots? And then what's the peculiarity of this and just a couple other me verbs? In the aorist, they're not formed with sigma alpha. They're formed with a tense formative kappa alpha. So this is just a straight aorist of tithemi. So I chose you and placed you. Tithemi lies very, very flexible in the meaning. You've got to look at the context. So here it's appointed. And I appointed you. Why? In order that you go, hupago, right? Subjunctive. You go and bear fruit. That's what disciples do. They bear fruit. And not only do you bear fruit, but also your fruit remains. In other words, what Jesus is interested in is, to use Paul's language, the fruits of the Spirit, but fruits of the Spirit that last. And now here's one of the benefits of being a fruit-bearing disciple. In order that, then on is just whatever. It's a very, very indefinite construction. The on moves it into the subjunctive. In order that whatever you ask the Father in my name, what is do? Well, again, another lesson in me verbs, right? The root that you memorized was do. It comes into the present as didomi. But since there's no reduplication, You know it's not in the present system, so this is just a straight aorist, but you already know that it's going to be a subjunctive, right? That whatever you ask the Father in my name, he... Now here's where it's really interesting. What tense is this? It's an aorist, isn't it? There actually is a variant that's in the future, because that's kind of what you would expect. Ask whatever the Father in my name, ask whatever you want, and he will give it to you. But here you have a subjunctive. It's outside of the indicative system. There's no time significance at all. And so this is a very gnomic, a very general truth, and he gives to you. But we don't say that in English. We have to translate it with the future, recognizing that it is, in fact, an aorist. So, you did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you that you might go and bear fruit, and that your fruit remain, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he does for you. He will do for you. So we're going to phrase this punctuation, but also a conjunction. Another conjunction. Hina is a dependent clause. Another kai. Another dependent clause. I want to make the contrast there emphatic, so I'm going to put all on its own side. In fact, I think I'm going to run out of space, so I need to shrink the text a bit. That should fit on the screen. So, you did not choose me, but I chose you. But I not only chose you, so I'm going to put a tab in here. I not only chose you, and I appointed you. In fact, I'm going to, might as well be really clear on this, keep the conjunctions visible. But I chose you and I appointed you. So in other words, the choose and the appoint are parallel. Now, why did I do these things? Well, I did it in order that you might go and bear fruit. And again, we have a sequence here, so it might be kind of nice to indicate this sequence. And I could put a chi on its own line, but I am going to run out of space. So what is the consequence of all this? I think I need to know the line here. In order that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he gives to you. Now, I forgot to point this out earlier, but what is the subject of do? Well, it's contained in the verb, isn't it? That he gives. What is the relative clause? It's a direct object, isn't it? So the relative clause is functioning as a direct object of do. In order that he give whatever you ask the Father in my name to you. He will give whatever we ask to us. Now, that obviously is a whole nother issue that's fun to talk about in class. And like I like to say, whatever it means, it has to mean something. I mean, so often, especially in Reform circles, there's a tendency to not want to give this, in my opinion, this verse is full force and say, well, prayer is a change to the prayer, all that kind of stuff. But this verse has to mean something. Even if we don't always see God answering our prayers in our time and in our way, i.e. there's a clue, but it's a good discussion. But anyway, normally, I'm not quite sure where to tie the hina clause. Probably it's going back to the verbs. Something like that. Or you might prefer the hina to the idea of bearing fruit, and that's what you want to tie the hina to. I'll let you talk about that in class.